Hello and welcome to the Connected Table Live on W4CY Radio, the weekly show that brings you influential tastemakers and dynamic leaders both front and center and behind the scenes in food, wine, spirits, and hospitality. We are your hosts,
David Ransom
and Melanie Young, your insatiably curious culinary couple. Food, beverage, and hospitality is our livelihood, and enjoying it is our way of life.
Anyway, our second guest is the wonderful Katrin Naelapaa, who's the director of Wines from Spain, which is a promotional arm of E6, which is the governmental agency in Madrid that oversees marketing and advertising promotion for Spanish wines in the U.S. And we've had the pleasure of working with Katrin for many years and knowing her for many more, and enjoyed many an evening over a glass of cava or rioja or one of the many other fabulous wines that come out of Spain in such places as Aspen or New York or Miami or wherever it may have been that we've gotten together. And Katrin's role is actually very significant in the wine world, as her role involves not only linking producers in Spain to importers in the U.S. through programs such as the Spanish Cellar and the Great Match, but also providing greater awareness of Spanish wines to consumers through programs and dinners and events like the Great Match Wine and Tapas, which I just mentioned, which is a program that pairs Spanish wines with foods from really around the world and not just Spanish foods, which will give an idea to the attendees that Spanish wine really goes with everything and not just the foods that come out of Spain. Katrin, it's so wonderful to have you on our show, and welcome.
Well, it's nice to be with you guys on your maiden voyage here.
Yes, and aren't you proud we pronounced your name right, correct?
And you've got
Naelapaa.
Thank you for that.
Well, we've had a dozen years of practice, so I think we've got it down.
I'm not going to put you on the spot and make you spell it.
No, well, I think we can do that too.
Just so you know, it's an Estonian name because Katrin's background is Estonian, which we will get into. But I'm going to start the questions, and David's going to fill in. You just to start off, you are the director of Wines from Spain. You've worked with Wines from Spain for many, many years. You've been named one of the most 100 influential people in the wine business. But what I think is interesting is to start, yours was a career switch. You were in banking. Tell us how you came into the wine business from banking.
I always like people to ask me, how did you come into the wine business? And I say, well, I was in banking, because, you can only spend so many years in finance, in my opinion. My apologies to all those people out in the audience who are listening. But I, 10 years in finance was enough for me. And I had developed just a real interest in wine, partly just as a consumer. I also had the pleasure of working on a couple wine-related transactions in my years in banking, and sort of one thing led to another, and I just thought if I could bring together this love of a product that I really believe in, as opposed to a financial product which I did not believe in, and I could marry that together with my fluency in Spanish. I had grown up in Mexico and had studied in Spain while I was in college, and I was really able to bring all these interests of mine together into one, and really never dreamed that it would turn out quite the way it has. And it's been really a wonderful ride to see Spain from its infancy into I think a much more widely accepted and admired wine region of the world.
Well, it's so true. I mean, Spain, not that it hasn't been making wine for hundreds of years, it certainly has, and good wine at that, but really it's over the last probably 10 or 15 years that the recognition of Spain as really a world power in winemaking has come to fruition, and most of that, we're happy to say, has been under your watch.
Well, we are celebrating. Wine from Spain is celebrating its 30th anniversary in the U.S. this year, which, of course, our event, the Great Match next week, will be a great celebration of that. I do like to say I haven't been involved in all 30 years of that growth, but certainly 2/3 of it, and I just think back on, even 20 years ago when we all first started, and the number of Spanish wine importers or the number of Spanish brands that were available in the U.S. market, and how that has just grown exponentially over these years, and it has a long way to go. Spain was the largest producer of wine in 2013. It has for many years had the most plantings of vines, and that means that there's a lot of juice, and that means that that those wines need to find homes, and this is, of course, the favorite market. The U.S. is the favorite market for European wine exporters. So I feel like I've got my job cut out for me for at least another 20 years.
It never seems to go away, does it?
No.
As long as people drink wine. So
that's right.
Spanish wines have grown in popularity exponentially. What are some of the challenges that are faced as you try to build the market?
Well, I think the sheer number of them. I mean, even just mentioning, that there were small numbers of producers in the market, playing in the market initially, and now there's, over 700 wineries that are sort of regularly exporting to the U.S. And yet, Spain, even despite that, and we have had steady growth for the last 20 years. The challenge, though, is that they're small producers and very, small to medium-sized producers, also typically, in the hands of small to medium-sized importers. So it's very fragmented. It's very hard to build a brand, for any individual winery. And I think back, looking back at, some of the biggest brands when I first started are still some of the biggest brands today in the Spanish wine scene. But in between those big brands are 700 other small producers who are exporting, and from many, many different regions and with many, many different grape varieties. And so it's fragmented, and it's very hard, I think, for the general consumer who wants to latch on to one or two things that they like and sort of follow those. I think sometimes Spain is a challenge for them, as are some of the other, I think, old world European countries.
Sure. And I think one of the challenging things within that stream of thought is the fact that shelf space never gets bigger. It's finite. So when all those new brands and smaller brands start coming into the marketplace, they're all jockeying for the same amount of shelf space on a liquor store shelf or a wine shop. And so do you feel that and find that those smaller brands and smaller producers that may have 1,000 cases or 2,000 cases a year to sell in the U.S. market or whatever it may be should focus on on-premise sales, which is usually a little bit easier because they can get their wine on lists and sell it that way, or buy the glass at a bar, whatever it may be?
Yes, I think for the most part, again, it depends on the type of wine it is, but I would say that for the most part, they have more success, finding placement if they focus on premise, and also that's where New York State comes in. I mean, where we don't have chain accounts, it is possible for them to find placement on store shelves, but it might be just one store, and then you can't build a brand that way. Yes, you can sell some wine that way, and maybe it's important for them, on their side in Spain to say that they are exporting to the U.S. and that might help them in other markets as well. Mm-hmm. But it does not allow them to build a brand, and it does not allow us, just to sort of stubbornly move from that spot we seem to be stuck in, being the sixth in imports, up to the fifth or the fourth or the third, which is really what we should be given the volume of production we have.
Aside from New York, where are Spanish wines selling very well in the United States?
Well, they really are selling well in so many markets now. That I would say that Florida, Very, very top, top market. They sell extremely well up in the, in the Boston area. They sell very well in California. I mean, we've seen a lot of growth on the West Coast and in Texas. But you find, I mean, even when I travel to some of the, some smaller regional markets periodically, I am just flabbergasted by the number of Spanish wines on a shelf. I was in Missoula, Montana. I mean, a very, very small metropolitan center, and yet there was probably 30, 40 facings for Spain, which is not bad.
No, that's not bad at all.
That's really great.
I always tell people that who have come to me for advice when they say, what market should we go to, or an importer, or whatever it may be. And as a journalist, I always say, go to the secondary markets. Don't go to the big markets, because you're going to have so much more competition in Chicago, New York, LA, Seattle, Miami, Houston, that if you go to places like, as you just said, Missoula, Montana, or Kansas City, or St. Louis, or one of those smaller, really great markets that still love food and wine, you're going to have a much better impact.
Yes. Yeah, and because one part of our work here at Wines from Spain is, as you mentioned, very importantly, to advise Spanish companies on how to enter the U.S. market, and that is we try so hard to counsel them to do that.
Sure.
I know that, but on the other side of it is, because New York has the structure it has, it makes it easier for them sometimes to actually come into the New York market, even though one would think, oh my goodness, this market's got to be completely saturated, because every exporting winery in the world wants to come to New York first. But I would agree there are some, and there are many times I see I see these lists of wineries that supposedly export to the U.S. and I've never heard of these brands, but I realize because they are selling in some of these secondary regional markets that we don't get to through our own activities.
I'm a believer in secondary markets, and also markets where city people go to play, which is why the Montanas and Idahos and the coast, those are important, because they want to have their good wine when they go. But often
the challenge, though, I think one of the challenges is the concentration of distribution. If there's only a couple very, very huge dominant distributors, it's very hard for the small brands that are starting off, again, within the hands of small importers, to find a distributor in those states. And as we all know, the U.S. is it's fragmented, 50 different states, 50 different sets of rules and regulations, and how you get your wines onto the retail shelf or onto a restaurant wine list.
Yeah. So just navigating that part of setting up a distribution channel is daunting, that's for sure.
Yeah, I always I counsel my Spanish wineries, the U.S. is not for the faint of heart. You have to, this is a long-term investment, and you cannot, you cannot think of yourself as having conquered the U.S. market just because you find yourself an importer.
Well, that's so true, and I always like to tell people as well, just think about how big the United States is. It's just a massive country, and just the market of LA could be the size of a country in Europe. Right. And so they have to consider just how big the United States is, and what they have to cover, and really kind of and compartmentalize each section or each region of the country to work on. Yeah. I would love to talk to you a little bit about the wines that are produced in Spain. Obviously, we all know that Spain is very well known for red wines, but also it makes some fabulous white wines, which have been really kind of up and coming in the last few years, maybe 4, 5, 6, 10 years. Why don't we talk a little bit about those? Because people know Rioja and Ribera del Duero and Priorat and all those great red winemaking regions, and also Bierzo and places like that. But there's some really wonderful, great aromatic white wines made in Spain. Do you want to give us a little insight as to some of your favorites, maybe, if you're allowed to, or at least talk about some of those?
I certainly have been a huge admirer and a supporter in so much of what we do, even at Wines from Spain, and I think helping launch the familiarity with Albarino and the Rías Baixas region, the northwest of Spain. And I think that Albarino really has been sort of the catalyst for so much of what else, we're now discovering white wine-wise in Spain. They, as a region, when they first became a DO in I think it was 1988, they themselves decided that they're a small region, small production. They can't be everywhere, and that for as an export market, they were going to focus on the U.S. market, and in so doing, and in putting a lot of their their promotion behind the U.S. market, I think today people really have grown to love Albarino, and that has also inspired neighboring regions with also fantastic grapes like Godello, which is predominant.
One of my favorites.
In the kind of more in the western, on the eastern end of Galicia, it's another incredibly beautiful aromatic white wine. Again, limited production because the terrain there is very, very challenging. Vineyard sizes are very, very small. But I think that I really feel like Galicia has done a tremendous amount to change people's perceptions of what Spanish white wines can be. Today, I think, Verdejo is really, has started to really take off. It's always been sort of the white wine of choice in the restaurants and cafes in Madrid. But it's been represented in the U.S. through a few great brands, but it hasn't really gotten, I think it has not had as much promotion behind it, and yet it is the region that has the capacity to truly be a volume white wine.
Rueda.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rueda, where Verdejo is the dominant grape.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about also some of the sparkling wines that are coming out of Spain now, because really I think some of the best value in the sparkling wine world comes out of Spain, but also when you get above the value level, some of the most interesting and incredibly delicious sparkling wines I've had are actually coming out of Spain as well, which is, I think, a testament to the winemaking techniques that they're using, but also just a testament to the wonderful grapes that they're using, again, mostly white, to make those wines.
And Cava is, I think, has really been sort of on the tip of everybody's interest in Spain for many, many years. And, because of the huge position that a company like Freixenet with their Codorn Negro, took early on in I was even looking back at this kind of 30-year trajectory. They clearly, opened the market, but but that has also been a challenge for other producers because they can't. Spain has had, the Catalonia in particular has had, just dozens of exceptionally high quality small producers, but they found it, very difficult to compete when the market's perception was that sparkling wine can only be of a certain price. And I think, but in today's world, now that everybody is so much more receptive to sparkling wines and to cavas from Spain, it's allowed us in the U.S. to discover some of these great little gems that the rest of the world would only taste if they traveled to the area.
Exactly. Really
and
amazing.
And rosé cava. I've seen it. I think the traditional cavas they were always there, or many of them were always there. We just didn't have the benefit of having them in the U.S. market. But now I am noticing that in the cava region, they've really stepped up their production of the rosé cavas.
Well, I think, and that's really probably the reason that we're seeing it too, as well as the fact that they have stepped up production, because for so long the production of rosé cava was so small that they just couldn't afford to send it out of the country.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's nice. I was having this discussion just yesterday with someone, and where they were saying that the beauty of the rosé cavas from Spain is that they're unlike, let's say, Champagne, where they are restricted to using 2 grape varieties and that's it. Is that in Spain the definition for cava allows them to be much more experimental. They can use their some of their the dominant indigenous grape varieties, but they can also experiment with other grape varieties, and so it's created a much broader range of styles of cava, and that's why I really do believe there is a cava for everyone.
I think there is too, and I'll be honest with you, we drink it all the time. So it's one of our go-to things to have,
and it's a value proposition no matter which price point you're at.
You are so right. No matter what price point it is, it's always going to be a great value, and the wines are so good. We always have some in our refrigerator.
We want to touch on one other category before we wrap up, and it's sherry. Speaking of variety of styles and versatility, tell us what you want listeners to know about sherry.
Well, the first thing I want people to know about sherry is that if you ever have the opportunity to travel to the region and taste sherry on location, I guarantee you, if you don't believe in it today, you will when you come back. I feel like it's one of those wines that you may think, it's not for me, but when you have it on location in Jerez or on the beach in San Lucar de Barramedas, sipping it while you're tasting some wonderful fresh, shrimp or other shellfish, you will be forever converted. That being said, sherry is many, many different wines. And you may say, well, I don't like it, I don't like dry sherry. Well, then there's the medium, there's the sweet, there's this rich, Pedro Jimenez's. I mean, there's such a range of styles in sherry that I do believe that if people would spend just a little bit of time familiarizing themselves with it, they will find a sherry that they will be passionate about. And the nice thing is that today, I mean, there has been sort of, I feel like, this whole renaissance in interest in sherry, amongst the sommelier and restaurant market, and so some of the very best sherries in Spain are coming to the United States right now.
And really representative of so many of the other regions of Spain, where small producers are coming forward and getting product out to the U.S. market. That's happening in Jerez as well with sherry. There's so many great small producers of sherry that nobody had ever heard of before about 10 years ago, which are now starting to get into the U.S. market. And some of those wines are absolutely fabulous.
So I just want to point out that your program, The Great Match, which David touched on earlier, is a tour. And we'll be going to different markets. Where can consumers and also trade try great matches and attend them around the country this year?
Well, this year we're having two. So our first one will be in New York, which is October 8th, which is next Wednesday. And this one, the New York one, is by far our largest. It's annual, and this one particularly as a celebration of the 30th anniversary of Wines from Spain. And the New York event is also much more of a lifestyle event where we not only, I mean, yes, it is a wine tasting and a wine and tapas tasting first and foremost, but we also sort of put it in the context of Spanish design, and we're partnering with the Tourist Office of Spain this year, and our venue is going to allow us to show just the most incredibly rich imagery on this 160-foot video wall that we're going to be using. And so people really are going to be able to travel to Spain. They're going to be able to sip Spanish wine and be in the middle of the scenery of Spain. I'm particularly excited about this year's New York venue for that reason. But we're also going to be in Los Angeles a month later, and we're going to host the event at Jose Andres's Bazaar at the SLS Hotel, and basically taking over the whole restaurant. So again, it's such a wonderful, rich way for people to experience Spanish wine, and in this case with the tapas inspired by Jose Andres.
And the date for that event is?
That event will be on November 10th.
And the website is to find out more? Greatmatch.org? Yeah.
So it would be spainsgreatmatch.org.
spainsgreatmatch.org. Fantastic. So if just as a wrap, if anyone wants more information on Wines from Spain, what website should they go to?
For more information about Wines from Spain, and also where they can explore many, many different wines, is winesfromspainusa.com. winesfromspainusa.com. Fantastic. Katrin Naelapaa, Director of Wines from Spain, we want to thank you very much for being a guest. We look forward to seeing you at the Great Match next week, and we look forward to toasting you again soon in person with some cava. Thank you very much.
Katrin, it was a pleasure to have you on the show. We look forward to doing it again.
Great to talk to you guys. See you next week.
Will do.
Thank you.